obligations, when the real creditor who gives up the property in exchange for the promissory obligation is paid in full, those promissory obligations, therefore, are an obligation strictly to pay and to retire principal from circulation. Paid principal is therefore the property of no one. Much less, however, do the mere negligible costs of merely publishing evidence of our promissory obligations to each other justify interest on the ostensible principal, which was never even given up nor risked by the purported banking system. So we are our own worst enemies so long as we believe this lie that we borrow money from the banking systems, that we borrow money into circulation. No, it's created, and it's always created on our issuance of a promissory obligation, which the banking system merely pretends to be a creditor and is not a creditor at all, because they never give up lawful consideration equal to the purported debt to the banking system. Nonetheless, it's this implicit obligation to maintain a vital circulation, which at most is comprised of some remaining principal, out of which we're of course obligated to pay all the remaining principal, plus whatever interest, and thus, because the entirety of the obligation cannot be resolved from the circulation, we are obligated to maintain a vital circulation. And because the strictures of the system require that we borrow that back into circulation, borrow what we pay in principal and interest out of the circulation, that we borrow this back as a new debt equal to the former debt plus so much as periodic interest on an ever greater sum of debt. So the sum of debt then inherently and irreversibly increases so long as we maintain a vital circulation by so much as periodic interest on an ever escalating sum of debt. And so the rate of failure actually escalates through the finite lifespan of any such system until, under this obfuscation of our promissory obligations to each other, under which the purported banking systems, which are not merely banking systems at all, perpetually multiply artificial indebtedness into terminal sums of artificial indebtedness, which our failure, our inevitable failure to service those debts then results in a natural deflation of the circulation as we attempt in the final death throes of the system yet to continue servicing these debts. And being as our creditworthiness has been exceeded to borrow further to maintain a vital circulation, then this of course engenders all the provisions which we're seeing everywhere around us, where to purportedly rescue these inherently terminal systems from their own mechanisms, we're required to assume further debts, which further debts, usually imposed through the conduits of federal government, which further debts we cannot even afford to service. So this explains why our taxes aren't rising, because on the one hand we are confronted with this terminal sum of indebtedness, and on the other hand we need to maintain a vital circulation somehow. Since we can't service any further debt, we don't, and so the federal governments have actually resorted inadvertently to borrowing further to make up the differences, and it just happens that this is the only thing which artificially extends the lifespan of each of these terminal systems, beyond its natural terminal state for some while, so long as we can continue to assume this influx of money, which itself comprises these artificial falsified debts to the banking system, which we cannot service. And so, of course, the proposition of austerity then is the preposterous proposition of austerity is readily understood in light of my thesis of inevitable failure, in that we can see that if we did service the federal debt purportedly to bring it down, this would exceed our already stressed, our capacity to service debt, which is already stressed to its limits, and would engender our immediate failure because we would be unable to make ends meet. We won't meet our mortgages any longer. Industry saddled with this increase in costs, it will increase the prices of its products or compromise margins of solubility to markets which can less afford the products even at the same former prices because the markets too are compromised. The problem is not austerity. The problem is that austerity, real, true austerity, is mathematically impossible under any imposition of this obfuscation, purposed obfuscation of the currency. And so the crime is the banking system itself, and the only way out of this problem is to resolve, as mathematically perfected economy resolves, the true nature of a promissory obligation, and to abide by that, which is to free our promissory obligations from exploitation, as is imposed by these purported central banking systems, which have been imposed across the world by breach of power, by denial of absolute consensual representation. So we see that the banking systems then are in fact the most threatening thing in existence. They're an abomination which dispossesses us of all our production and awards that production to entities which produce nothing. So this idea and this inherent, inevitable ramification of the obfuscation of the currency which these central banking systems impose upon us, then, is the very thing against which we must unite. And anything less than that, of course, will be to as much as guarantee to ourselves inevitable failure, if not the further injustices which would be suffered under any failure to adopt what in fact can be certified to be an absolute solution of all the monetary issues. So it's interesting in the case of the Kucinich camp that little by little the advocated solution, which is presented always without qualification, that the advocated solution has morphed more and ever more so into or toward at least mathematically perfected economy. And the underlying reasons for this are a controversy between myself, the proposition of mathematically perfected economy, and the advocates of the disposition which is a morphing disposition of the Dennis Kucinich camp. Now, how do we get there in this history of the processes? I naturally followed in the course of advocating mathematically perfected economy through this 2008 presidential campaign. I had, well, it's conceivable that I was misled to some improper optimism about the Paul campaign engaging my proposition of mathematically perfected economy. People who may or may not have had any actual authority to make promises or encouraging remarks led me to support, the Paul efforts, contingent, of course, on his engagement of this proposition of mathematically perfected economy. That is, either engage me and differ, but if you do, be accountable for your differences. And if not, then we have unity, we have a candidate for actual solution. Otherwise, what we have is conflicting propositions, of which, at most, one can be correct. And so this matter of evasion is particularly destructive because we have every 4 years of a presidential term that goes by, we have committed ourselves to a reckless course which hasn't resulted in solution, purposely so. The Obama campaign returned my proposition of mathematically perfected economy unopened. Certified delivery, return receipt requested by campaign regulars within the Obama campaign. So, in the wake of frustration with the Paul campaign's evasion of this confrontation, which was to transpire, that is, an engagement of discussion of the proposition of mathematically perfected economy versus the perpetual dogma of this purported Austrian economics, which is a pseudoscience and a preposterous one, entirely bereft of formal proof and theorem. Now, if you're an advocate of the people, why not engage in such a discussion? Why not do it in front of your constituents? Why not do it openly? Why not do it exhaustively? If you're really after representation, you would never avoid such an opportunity to engage in such a thing. So, troubled with the irresponsiveness of the Paul campaign, I determined that it was time to make one final closing effort with the Paul people. And I made a telephone call to his head campaign offices. Introduced myself again as Mike Montagne, founder of People for Mathematically Perfected Economy and author of a thesis of that any purported economy subject to interest inherently terminates itself under insoluble sums of artificial debt, and that there is one and one only solution to the categoric faults of any pretended economy, and even an immediate way to establish mathematically perfected economy, even virtually without cost. And this fellow who answered the phone